whether that's the amount of tokens that are needed to complete a vote and make it passable, or some like minimum decentralization, meaning how many people are involved. We need X amount of people. If those people don't show up, it's not a legitimate vote. We run into those issues pretty frequently. Contrarian decision making isn't incentivized either. So if maybe you've got a boss who's voting one way, or you've got somebody who you find really influential, somebody who's a mentor maybe, and maybe you disagree with them and you don't want to disagree with them publicly. Right now, there's no privacy on tools like Snapshot. Not that I'm aware of. Maybe there's a plugin or a strategy that you can put into place. But majority agreement typically happens. People will vote the way that others vote because they don't want to be seen as contrarian. There's no incentive for really doing that. It can be slow to make decisions in comparison to small teams who are making, a startup, for example, going lean. They might be able to respond much more quickly to crisis. Governance attacks where individuals or groups can take over a treasury and drain all the funds, basically destroying the organization. These things are certainly a possibility in an attack vector. Information asymmetry, people closer to the core of an organization may have more information than those at the edges. So at BitDAO we have 19,000 token holders, and then we've got a handful of partners, and we've got people who, our delegation process is permissionless, meaning anybody can do it, can delegate and take part in the process, but they may have more or less information around a particular proposal depending on whether they were involved or not. And this is with any DAO, this is with any organization, be it Web3 or not. Information asymmetry exists, and people may have trouble understanding how decision impacts them. Fragmentation across platforms is major. I'm sure you've seen the number of DAO tools, which are all, to a certain extent, amazing. The people are developing these new ways of operating organizations. But what happens is that, people will have a discussion on one platform. They'll share comments and updates on a proposal on another platform. Voting takes place in another, and then it starts to stack up, and the experience gets pretty fragmented. Noisy conversations. We're all aware that there's tons of token holders who are incentivized by different things, and because the space is permissionless, we might have short-term thinking overcoming long-term thinking and discussions, and creating a really noisy space where it's hard to improve proposals and ideate together. So just a quick overview there on some of those problems. Quick note about automation is A in DAOs. So where we're at today, and again up until the point that all decisions are made by robots, or the majority of decisions are made by robots, we will need human coordination and communication. This is like ideation and decision making. How do we build up an idea and then decide how to improve it, and then from there, how do we make changes to that? The execution part can, to a certain extent, be automated by code, and this human coordination and communication piece can also be enhanced by code. But I don't think there's anybody out there really pushing for full automation of human decision making. So let's just keep that top of mind as we continue to move out. What really matters is how do we increase the trust in DAOs. So if we are, by one example, internet native organizations, and you and I don't know each other, but we're taking part in this DAO, how can you assure me that you're a trustworthy person? This is where code comes in and things like smart contracts. I'm sure many of you are already aware of all of this. But happy to discuss further if needed. Okay, so types of DAOs. So each DAO, as I mentioned, is motivated by its own sort of core mission, its principles, its values. And these could be communities, protocols, funds, meaning investment funds, which is what BitDAO is, media, social impact, gaming, and services. And these can all be related to each other. So like, for example, a community that's rallying around an artist who creates NFTs could eventually spin out or become a gaming community that uses the IP that's underlying that NFT to become a gaming DAO that votes on how that IP is used within a game. So basically, each one will make their own trade-offs based on their goals, products, services, their target users, target governance participants, the resources that they have available, and the tools that they're using or that are available to them. Let's see, so governance. Why governance, and what is it? To keep this relatively simple, I like, again, to break it down into this simple process of ideation, decision-making, which is discussion or decision-making, and execution. So just super simple, this is a sort of dumbing down, but I think it's instructive for this hackathon. And three important elements that I like to think about in DAO governance are the pace of governance. So basically, how quickly can decisions be made, and when are they made? What's governable, what actually needs to touch the process, and the scale of process, and how do you measure that? So for pace, you might have a crisis that comes up. How do you deal with a crisis that needs to be solved now? If your process is too slow, you have these rigid controls, discussion for 1 week, voting for 1 week. It might take you 2 weeks to solve this crisis that needs to be solved in 1 hour. Next is what decisions are governable. Does every little decision, if you need to update a logo on a third-party website, does that need to go through a vote? Or are we just voting on how we allocate funds from the treasury and how we update governance parameters for our particular DAO? what decisions need to touch the process is a super important one. And then the scale of governance and how it's measured. So small, medium, large, simple way to break it down. But what do we measure? Could be value, time, or commitment. So are we voting on allocating $1,000 or $100 billion? That's a sort of value scale. Time, are we committed to this decision for one day? Do we just need to submit a pull request and correct some bug in the next 2 hours? Or are we, do we have a whole team working on this for the next 3 years? And that also touches on this commitment scale. Do we have tons of people working on this for years or minutes? Cool. One other quick thing to point out here too is that like this D in DAOs, this decentralization element, governance is really how DAOs drift further into this decentralized world of operation. So governance is used to get more people in the room voting and discussing. Oops. So here's a quick framework, somewhat quick. This is not all inclusive, just like everything else here, but it's just a way to think about it, to break it down into more simple terms so we can see a high level image of what we're gamifying here. So again, what type of DAO is being governed? Could be any of these or another type. What is the core purpose? This could be a business or community goal. It could be as simple as making money, building relationships, having a positive impact in for example, social impact DAOs, creating an experience, maybe in the sense of an NFT community or gaming community. And then next is where does the governance process take place? Again, breaking this down into 3 phases: ideation, discussion, and voting, and talking specifically here at number 3 about what tools are being used. How are votes cast? This could be on or off chain, gated or public, formal or informal. Informal could be something like Discord emoji votes. Formal could be totally on-chain token voting. Are we leveraging things like coins or NFTs, tokens? How would like to define those? And this is another important piece in number 5, relates back to number 2 here. So describe your preferred governance participants. And realistically, these preferred participants need to be aligned with the core purpose of the DAO. They need to be motivated by the mission. But these preferred participants might be product users, subject matter experts, artists in the case of like an NFT community, could be in the case of something like an influencer, DAO, it could be an audience, it could be the people who are bought in to the concept that this person is making. And these are sort of core motivations that drive humans in general. These apply to everybody, everywhere. We all experience these to a certain extent when we're making decisions. We all want social influence to a certain degree in certain situations. We all value scarcity in different situations. But I think it's interesting to sort of look at your preferred governance participants and think about where they might be influenced the most, what core drive them to create an impact in your organization. Moving on is where do these participants have the most impact within the governance process? So again, if you've got product users, or a bunch of artists, do we really want them ideating on how to run a protocol? Or a bunch where we've got 100,000 token holders? Are they really the ones to make a technical decision in building a proposal that will later be executed and manage user funds? Thinking about where each of these preferred users have the highest impact. And it can be all of them, that's fine, but just imagining where they plug in is I think, important when we think about poking at these core motivations to gamify their experience, to influence them to take some action. Now, what crypto capabilities or parameters are we using? Is it on-chain data, tokens, digital ownership, in the sense of NFTs or other objects? Smart contracts, identity, reputation, credentials, and broadly, is it just ownership? Is it the sense of having a wallet and owning your whatever's in there, whatever it might be? And finally, what resources can we offer as a DAO, as incentives? These can be financial, such as tokens. These can be sort of scarcity-based things like access and time to a team or an event or an online space. Credentials, again, something that a user can own and take somewhere else. Or can we give them some social influence somewhere in the DAO or in the broader Web3 space or in the world in general? All right, so let's jump into gamification. I hope that was a good primer for y'all on what DAOs are, how I'm sort of thinking about how I'm approaching this. And again, this is, there's no limiting factor here. Please express your own opinion and your own creativity in what you create for this hackathon. So what is gamification? This section, I'm going to rely heavily on the work of Yukai Chow, who's a gamification expert and behavioral design consultant. And I'll just use his definition here, gamification. So gamification is design that places the most emphasis on human motivation in the process. In essence, it's a human-focused design as opposed to a function-focused design. So how I like to think about it in very simple terms is how do we make people actually enjoy doing the work or contributing productively to some outcome? So rather than assuming that people are just going to show up and do the thing that they're supposed to do, that needs to be done, we need to motivate them based on these sort of core drives, core human drives. to get them to sort of enjoy the process, really. So why gamify governance in the first place? And my answer is that gamification allows us to be intentional and specific. So we can increase turnout, we can incentivize good decision making, and we can incentivize these preferred participants. Again, being intentional, being specific about who's involved and where they're involved can lead to greater outcomes. Remember, our goal is to make better decisions as an organization when we're a DAO. And we can use gamified elements to make this happen. And for example, we may want to dissuade, we can use gamified elements to even dissuade others to not take part in a particular part of a process. Though I don't have many examples of how this might work, to be honest with you. But for example, a technical contributor might have different games that incentivize them than everyday token holders. There might be certain things that influence them that your everyday token holder, particularly those who are just speculating, wouldn't be necessarily incentivized by. And one important piece here in the DAO space, and in the Web3 space in particular, is expanding token utility. So how can we make the token more useful is one question we might ask when gamifying. If the token utility drives value for the token in the sense that people want to use it more to interact with these gamified experiences, then it could have a positive impact on the project overall. So this is a lever we can pull on. All right, so let's jump into some of these core drives. So core drive, this is again from Yukai Chao. This is his Octalysis framework. Full credit to Yukai Chao. Highly recommend anybody who's interested in this topic to go check out his offerings over his website. And free resources as well. There's some great stuff over there for thinking deeply about this. But in the middle here are the core drives. Number 1, epic meaning, empowerment, social influence, unpredictability, avoidance, scarcity, ownership, and accomplishment. These are all things we all experience in our life. And these are things that drive us to take particular actions and things that motivate us to just make certain trade-offs, really. These are used throughout the crypto space already in the broader market, but also within particular products and projects. So epic meaning, this relates directly to this core values and principle in DAOs or Web3 projects, but in particular with NFT projects, we see this element of lore. So the people who are bought into the underlying belief that what you're doing is good or it's interesting, then this is where they get their sense of epic meaning and where they might start doing the thing for the sake of just doing it because they like it. They like what's going on over there. Empowerment, I won't go into details for every single one of these. There's a handful of examples here on the outsides about how you might implement or create triggers to trigger these core motivations. There's different elements you might use here from UI features to just sort of social pieces to get people to feel these certain things and make certain actions. But there's a handful of these like scarcity and ownership, which are inherent in a lot of Web3 products and projects. I think one of the number one most active proposals across a lot of DAOs is like, can we burn the token? Can we limit the supply? Can we make this thing deflation? We hear a lot of talk about this. This is pushing on this core drive of scarcity. People want to increase the value of the thing is expected to increase as it becomes more scarce. This is just a sort of core human drive. People want it, the less there is of it, typically, at least for something that's in demand. Ownership, again, wallets are another core piece of this, and it's a core part of why people are involved in this space. But as I mentioned, there's a lot of different elements that you can implement into a gamified experience here on the edge. I'm happy to discuss these with anybody. Some of the key ones that you see across Web2 and Web3 products are things like leaderboards, progress bars. So if you're signing up on like LinkedIn and Facebook, I believe there's a progress bar, and they really do drive results. People want to complete those progress bars. They want to get finished with the task, and it is a strange incentive.
Okay, thanks for your online presentation.